Welcome to the Journey Church podcast. I'm Katie Thompson, and I am the Journey Kid Director here at Journey. And we're just going to have a conversation today with Pastor Jon Allen as an ongoing conversation in a series that we're in called Under Construction. And Jon did a fabulous job just beginning that conversation last week about parenting and being really open and honest. If you weren't there for that conversation, make sure that you check that out. But Jon, one of the things that you said on Sunday that really stuck out to me is you said as parents at some point, and preferably sooner than later, that we are going to have to be the parent. All throughout Scripture, we see that there is this spiritual authority pathway that God sets out before us. And when you said that, I was like, amen, like we got to be the parents. And at the same time, I was like, man, it does kind of sting. I'm a mom to 3 kids, so I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. And even just this past week, we had a situation at home, and I had to kind of remove myself from the situation and mourn it a little bit because I just felt the weight of the sadness that sometimes it's hard. It's really hard to be the parent. Love my kids. Like I want to do anything for them. I would want to give them the world, but in the same breath, boundaries are important. Didn't know if you kind of had anything else that you would like say to those of us who are kind of like in the muck of it right now, where we're like, yeah, I really want to be the parent, but it also is kind of hard and setting those boundaries.
Yeah, well, I would say it is hard. Yeah, it is hard, and I feel that pain. And specifically with setting boundaries, it always feels hard because it feels like boundaries are always a disputed thing, right? And every human, like we want to figure out what the edge of the boundary is. We're more inclined to push boundaries. And kids especially, they want to push a boundary. They want to find out what the boundary is. But I think it's helpful as parents if we also realize we actually need and actually crave the boundary. Part of the reason kids are looking for the boundaries because they crave it. They want to know where the edge of things is. And then they start to learn, okay, that's the safety zone, or that's the comfort zone, that's the permission zone. And I've often thought about a study that was done years ago now. A bunch of kids in an elementary school had a really big playground, but it was actually surrounded on multiple sides by roads that were fairly busy, and there was no fencing on the playground. And so these kids would go out and play, and what they found is the kids always played in the middle of the playground. They didn't go to the edges. They didn't take advantage of the expanse of it all. So just to test it, see what human nature would do, they came in and they put up fencing all around the edges of that playground. So there was now a barrier between the playground and those busy roads. And on the first day they sent kids out with the fences, the kids all ran to the edges and used the entire playground. And it was actually like the boundaries actually created more space for them. They used more of the space. Lack of boundaries really was restrictive to them. There's something about knowing where's the boundary that actually opens us up to a little more freedom, to a little more sense of adventure. And I think if we can, as parents, remember, okay, when I establish a boundary, I'm not doing it to be mean, even though it might feel mean sometimes. I'm not doing it to limit my kid. I'm actually doing it to expand the options for my kid or my kids. The boundary actually gives them more confidence that, oh, somebody's thought this out for me, and I'm going to learn to play in this. Now, can we make boundaries too restrictive? And yes. And can we make them too loose? Yes. Is it more art than science? Yes. But to understand there's a lot of value in them is a really big, really significant piece of the puzzle. And then maybe just the attachment to that. I think sometimes the reason we struggle with the boundary is if we set a boundary, we don't feel very much like a friend. We feel more like a parent. And that has to be okay. We have to be okay with that tension, that we do have to be the parent way before we're the friend. We can be their friend and have no guarantee that we'll be their friend in the end. So we might as well be the parent. That's what they really need. That's what God's given us the opportunity and the privilege of. So let's be the parent. Let's establish the boundaries to give them the best chance to kind of spread their wings really wide.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good word right there. What would you say along with that? Like, so we want to be the parent, not just always the friend. There's no guarantee in that. But where do relationships and having that mom, child, dad, child, maybe it's a grandparent, child, how does that relationships kind of fit into like setting those boundaries and setting those rules, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question, and super good to include the grandparenting thing. I don't know if I would have thought about that initially, but grandparents, the same rules apply to the grandparent dynamic, especially if you get a lot of time with your grandkids. All these rules really and principles really still apply. The best way to add value to the boundaries and add credibility to the boundaries is to make sure that when we set the boundaries, we have relationship, but that it is a healthy, loving, life-giving parent relationship, not so much the effort to try and have a friendship. There's this old adage it's been around a really long time now, but that says if you have rules but no relationship, you end up with rebellion. Rules without relationship leads to rebellion, because we want boundaries to help us in relationships, not just to help us abstractly in no man's land. And so as parents, when we set a boundary or we create a rule, we want to do it from a place of relationship and love and investment and buy-in and support. And that helps limit the chance of rebellion. And so part of the way we help that is, we are loving, we're consistent, we're engaged, we're intentional, all those things. But some of the dynamic is we say, let's give them a why. Like if we give a why, then we're getting to convey the value of the relationship. Like, why is this the boundary? Why is this the rule? Why is this the expectation? If you take the relationship out, it does feel like eventually that's going to lead to some version of rebellion, however minor or however extreme. And the same is true that if you only have relationships but no rules and no boundaries, you've got a really good chance of ending up with rebellion there too. There's nothing to help guide our kids.
Yeah. It's really cool because if you think about like God, our perfect example of a father, like that's so true.
Yep.
Like God never set rules without the context of wanting to have a relationship with us.
Right. Yeah. And how many times, like if we think about it, have we like surrendered ourselves to a rule or a command or a boundary of God and actually found all sorts of new freedom in our soul and in our mind or in our relationships? And it's because it's designed to help the relationship, not hurt the relationship. It's designed to help the person, not hurt the person. So, he's the perfect example. He really is just trying to help us play it out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love that playground analogy with the fence and that kind of thing. Wonder, as someone who has parents to grown children now, right?
I guess we're
your girls are
grown. Our girls are 19, so close enough to grown. Yeah.
Yeah, like looking back on those past 19 years, has there been different times where you've like set some sort of boundary, you set up a fence per se, and you've had to kind of like move that? Maybe it's as they were growing and they are stepping into a new phase, or maybe it's like, oh, we didn't really set that right, or that's not working. And how do you kind of evaluate those boundaries and rules, and do they ebb and flow?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this one might be controversial, but we'll just go there. So when we first got our girls' phones, and I honestly can't remember what age that was, but we were late adopters to that. I mean, we kind of lived on the thing of you could never be too late on that. We thought you could be too early, so we probably erred on the side of too late. One of the dynamics was we did a phone contract with them. We said, hey, there's a lot of power and potential in this, for good and for bad. And so let's just have an agreement of how we handle the phone and all those kind of things. One of the things that was integral to the contract was that it was actually our phone. We owned the phone. We paid for it. We bought it. We paid for it. We paid all the bills. It was our phone. And so we had some guidelines around phones. For a long time, our girls didn't have phones in their bedrooms at night. Like that, we just thought that's a distraction. It's not much. We'd rather have them sleep, all those kind of things. That morphed over time. With it, we changed the boundaries. They got older and they displayed like a lot of responsibility with it. They handled it well. When they first had phones, we even checked their phones. We said, look, your phone's ours. We always want the password. We always want, and they were great with that. They knew we were checking their phones periodically. It was really when our girls went to college, one of them said to me after they'd been gone a few months, hey, when we come home, here, I changed my password, but here's the new password so you can check my phone when I come home. And I just said, I haven't checked your phone over a year. Like it's probably 2 years. I haven't checked your phone in a really long time, because the boundary had to move as they aged and they had more responsibility, and they were at ages where they were going to have to live with some of the consequences if they got outside of healthy boundaries. And so I do think it morphs over time. Curfews change. When you can drive changes. I mean, and even some of that's legal, right? When the kids get their driver's license, there's this window where they can only drive with one person in the car, and they can only drive at certain times a day. Before you know it, they can drive whenever, and they can drive whoever. And so the boundaries are moving, the targets are moving. And I think the important thing to keep in mind is you keep clarifying the why. Why is the boundary what it is today? And it really is an honor to responsibility. Like when they show success and fruitfulness and their life is thriving because they've done well inside of one boundary, then it expands. And that's part of really healthy growth.
Yeah, we have that a lot with our kids, just at different stages too. Like our youngest, we pretty much have to tell her black and white how things are going to be. She doesn't have a lot of rational thought. Whereas like our oldest, we ask him a lot of questions to try to help him, because at some point he is going to be where your girls are now and a grown adult. And we want him to be able to think through things. So anytime there is a boundary in place that he gives some pushback on, we do try to ask him some reasoning questions. And when appropriate, even let him into, here's our concern about an issue. Let's see if we can come up with that together. But at the end of the day, we're setting that boundary because that's what they can handle.
Right. Yeah, it's age appropriate, right? And I think it helps when you set age appropriate boundaries, we then know, okay, these are the things we have to discipline. Discipline is just part of the equation. And I'd rather our kids experience discipline or consequences from us early, because the world's going to be very harsh with consequences. Mm-hmm. Like if they make bad decisions or they don't do well at something or they don't meet a standard at work or something, they're going to get harsh consequences, harsh treatment. So I'd rather discipline them from a place of love and helpfulness and understanding. And so the boundaries create that pocket. And much like we set different boundaries at different ages, discipline's different, right? Like it changes over time. We used to tell our girls what they were going to eat for breakfast. Now, if they ate 6 Pop-Tarts for breakfast, we can't do anything about it.
They have to live with that consequence.
Right, they got to live with the consequence. It is what it is. And so it does change over time. Yeah, it's way more art than science. Yeah. Katie, what do you find, like, how much does your kid's personality impact some of the boundaries? Not just age. Like, I think for us, we had different boundaries for the girls, even though they were the same age. Sometimes just because they had such different wirings and social interactions and friend groups that even that pushed us more to art than science. So with you, with like kids at 3 different ages, do you find personality impacting it too?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I used to look at friends before we had kids and by like, how did their kid turn out that way, you know? And now I have 3 humans in my household, well, 4 humans in my household, but 3 young humans in my household that all are completely different personalities raised by the same mom and dad, and it's just mind-boggling. So yeah, one of my children likes to talk a lot, so there is never any question about what happened during their day or who they talked to, who they sat with. I probably know everything about their Journey Kid leader that they hang with in Journey Kids, and their teacher at school that their teacher would be mortified if they knew everything my kid tells me. As opposed to one of my other kids who is much more reserved. So even in sitting through that situation, we've had to think about how do we create the best situation for that child to win? So there's certain environments that we just don't let her go to alone. Not because we don't necessarily trust her, but it's not maybe safe for her yet until she learns to have a voice. And so even in some of those personality differences, we also have told our kids, like, we're going to give you a little ounce of freedom. We're going to try this out until you give us a reason not to. So one of our kids who's in middle school now, wants to walk into our local ice cream shop down the road with some friends after school. And we're all for that until he proves he can't handle it. So he very much knows that. And I think there's even freedom in that, because at some point you have to give your kids a little bit of freedom. You can't, like you said, even with your girls and cell phones and that kind of thing, at some point they're going to be an adult.
Yes.
But you can't just rip it all open all at once and say, here's the whole world because you're a teenager now and here's access to everything. So we've had lots of open conversations with our kids even about that. Yeah,
it's really good. It's really good. And I think much like we give them like freedom in small bites and little doses and then let them grow into that, sometimes we don't always get it right. And so sometimes saying, look, we created a boundary and it wasn't the right boundary. Like we missed it. Like we either shouldn't have let you have that much rope or we should have let you have more. So can we all adjust now? And we found, at least with our girls, like just admitting things like that sometimes, like, look, we all know we need boundaries and we didn't get this boundary right. So we have to redo it. And we're not just redoing it because we feel like it. We're redoing it because we really think it needs to happen. And it might not be because you didn't respond right. It might be because we didn't set the right boundary in the first place.
Yeah,
we
for sure.
misjudged something.
I remember having a few conversations with Pastor Derek, who leads the middle of the location, and him just saying to his kids multiple times, and I've stole this from him, I've never been the parent to you at this age before. And I think that all encompasses, I've never parented this age before, but also you at this age, because
Right
it's
on.
a both and.
Yes. Yeah, that's so good. Our girls would sometimes say to us, you may have been a teenager before, but you have never parented a teenager at Caledonia High School in this year. And I think, thank you. You're right. I haven't. That's what I'm trying to say. You're proving the point here. Yeah, just that thing of let's learn this together because none of us have ever done this before. Yeah. One of the other boundary pieces that I think is interesting too is to think for people in a 2-parent home, like, how intentional do we have to be for parents to agree on boundaries and to have, like, not united fronts like this is a battle, but united voices. Like how determined do we have to be with that? And I wonder how often as parents, if left to our own, we wouldn't actually pick the same boundary. And somebody has to concede or bend or mesh to that a little bit. I think it's another hard dynamic. Again, it's more art than science, but I think it's another true and real dynamic.
Yeah, we definitely have experienced that and had to like continually come back to like, okay, we're a team first, and these small humans came after.
Yes.
There are some times where I have set a boundary for our kid, and my husband has just said, if mom said that, that's what's happening. And then when they go to bed at night, we have a conversation, and we've had to like wrestle through some of those, like, how did you arrive at that? And I'm not sure if I would have necessarily said the same thing. And we've gone back and forth, but as much as possible, we try to be a united front for our kids. And we don't always get that right either. There's some times where I'm like, why would you say that?
Right.
And that kind of thing. But as much as possible, our kids would very much know that if dad said that, then that's what's happening. If mom said that, that's what's happening. And then there are a lot of times where we have to kind of duke that out later.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. We will sort that out. But right now we agree.
Yeah.
We're in this thing together and we agree. And then same is true for discipline. Like when the boundary's broken in whatever way, small or big, the same is true with discipline. Like we can't get caught as parents, questioning the other one's discipline in the moment. And discipline's really hard. Discipline's just as hard as the boundaries, probably harder, right? And but yet there does have to be some level of, and everybody can determine what that is, but there has to be some level of consequence outside the boundary. And if parents don't agree, or at least agree in the moment, there's a lot of trouble that I think comes with that. Again, with you guys, with 3 different kids, different ages, different personalities, your kids get to watch different discipline among their own siblings, which is probably a unique piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that's very hard. We actually, where one of our children always waves the banner of fair. So one of the things that we have to say repeatedly, and all of our kids, you can come up to them and ask them, fair doesn't mean equal. Like they'll tell you, because what one of our kids needs isn't what another kid means. And we recently just did a value exercise with our kids, and the one who argues that the most, one of the things he really values is fairness. So we've had to have some conversations about what does that actually mean and what does that look like, by not diminishing something that is valuable to him, because he does value that, and he does some really great things exercising that strength in his friend groups and around the people he's around. But at the same time, realizing that what your 7-year-old little sister needs is not the same thing as what you might need.
Yes. Yeah. It's so true. Yeah. That fair and equal thing. Our girls were the same age, but they did things at different ages, whether it was certain relationships or certain opportunities or certain job experiences. And so it led to a lot of things that didn't feel quote unquote fair, but it couldn't mean.
Well, you maybe lean into that a little bit, because I have lots of conversations with parents who say, I did this for my one kid, so that's what I have to do for the others, even though they maybe think, oh, the time has changed. I mean, you say you have 2 girls, same age. didn't always allow them to do the same things. How do you determine that?
That's a great question. I think if we say something like, what I did for one kid, I have to do for the other, that's fair. I understand it, and I understand the temptation. It's a really hard tension to manage. But if we pulled back and looked at it from the outside for ourselves, I think what we'd want to say is the fair thing I want to do is do what's best for each of my kids. And that may not be the same thing for each of them, but I want to do what's best for them at their current age, their wiring. What are their current relationship circles? What are their current circles of support? What are their current challenges? What are their current stress levels? What are their dreams? Our girls have very different dreams. It's like, what is that? So what's fair may not be give them the same thing. What I do want to give them both, though, is what's best for them in the moment. And what's best for one of them may actually be torture for the other. So I want to pull back far enough to say, yeah, your word was need. What do they really need? What do they need to win? And as teenagers, they did not fully understand that all the time, because it's more easy to look at the object or whatever's happening in the moment when we're trying to think as best we can, hey, we've got to steward these lives as best we can while they're our responsibility. And so what's best for each one of them? Yeah.
Yeah. And as an adult, I mean, even just from a brain point of view, like our brains are able to process things way more empathetically, logically than a teenage brain can.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's no diss at a teenage brain. That's just the science of it.
Right. Their brains are probably in a lot of ways far more creative than ours.
Oh, 100%.
But yeah, not fully developed to see nuance of certain things and the gray areas of life quite as well. And so we do. That's again where we have to be the parent and not the friend necessarily. Like, again, I don't want to say we're not going to be our kids' friends at some point, but we're the parent first. And that's where we have to be willing to say, I have the vantage point of years and a fully developed brain, hopefully. And so I do see it differently, and we have to respond accordingly to that and hope and beg and pray and plead that someday they understand that, that becomes clear to them. Yeah. The last boundary thing that I think I'd say was, we were talking about the parent agreement thing, is what are the boundaries in two-parent homes? What are the boundaries that parents need to set to protect their marriage, to help their marriage thrive? Like, I think the boundary thing works both ways. Yeah. Like, our kids need boundaries and we need to set them, but our marriage will thrive best if it has the right boundaries as it relates to parenting. Like, parenting feels all-consuming and it's exhausting and hard. And so we need some boundaries to have times where it's not all-consuming. And maybe that's different for every couple. It's certainly different with age, right? When you have toddlers and you can't sleep and they need your 24/7 care, that's different than when you have a 16-year-old who's going to be gone all day anyway. Yeah. But
we even had that a growing boundary experience. Like, within that, we live very busy lives. Our kids are involved in lots of things, and we love it. We love a lot of it. But my husband and I looked at each other one day and we're like, we need to set a routine night that we are just getting away. And when we first set that into place, our youngest literally cried the first night we tried to walk out the door, and she hugged my leg and was like, please don't leave. And part of me was like, I don't really have to, we don't really have to go. But we kept on that, and we did Tuesday date nights for a very long time. And that was just something that we did. And then a new season hit, and it didn't work on Tuesdays. And a few weeks that we didn't do that later, my youngest said to me, you haven't gone on Tuesday date night in a while. So she adapted to that boundary, even though it would have been really easy in the beginning to say, we don't really have to do that. And we just saw how that really just impacted our ability to connect to each other. We've had a lot of people further ahead of us that we lean on for wisdom, and have said, please invest in your marriage. And maybe you even have some insight on that, because one day your kids are going to move out, hopefully. I mean, yes, hopefully and not hopefully.
Right. It's a little bit of both, isn't it? Yeah, we grieve that they're in school right now and are really glad they at least come home some. But yeah, there's an element where in this season we're right now, while we're recording this, our girls have been gone for several months for school. Eric and I have commented how many times we are really grateful we like each other.
Yeah, for sure.
And lots of people, again, like you talked about people ahead of you. We've had people ahead of us investing in us further down the road than us, saying, cultivate this. And now we're really glad. And it would have, like you said, it would have been easy to neglect a lot of other times. So one of our things was stay married trips. We said for a long time in the girls' growing up years, we're going to get at least 48 hours a year where we're just gone without them. It's just the two of us somewhere. And sometimes that was someplace close and sometimes that was place far away. But it can be hard to do it, and it takes commitment and sacrifice. But the boundary now in this place of life with the girls in school, we're reaping the benefit of that now.
Yeah.
We probably reaped the benefit of it back when we were doing it and we didn't know couldn't see it, but we definitely see it now, that we do like each other and we do miss them desperately, but we're okay because we enjoy being together. So, we're grateful for that piece of it. Yeah. Got to be something to do to protect that marriage piece.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is maybe this is a whole different discussion for another day because I know we got to wrap this one up, but I think that dynamic of setting boundaries to protect our marriage, and like leaving kids for a night and they grab us, right? They don't want us to leave or whatever. I don't think our kids are nearly as fragile as we often think they are, or as society has told us they are. Mm-hmm. And so what do we do when we've been told or maybe have a leaning to think they're more fragile than they are? How do we overcome that, get around that? Again, it's a different discussion, but when we're going to set boundaries to protect and facilitate healthy growing marriage, which will impact healthy growing parenting, having maybe a different or more healthy or complete view of that fragility or lack of fragility is a helpful deal. So I know it's a different discussion every day, but I'll just open that can and then we'll finish this up.
Yeah. Well, we had talked about this is just the start of multiple other conversations. Yep. So, would love if this was helpful to those of you that are listening. Even like, let us know, like what kind of questions are you wrestling with as a parent? And I would 100% say I am not an expert at this. I am learning and growing.
Same.
But yeah, anytime that we can just be in it together and share some wisdom from different stages of life and that kind of thing, that's what we want to do as a church, and supporting each other. And what does God have to say about this? And how can we partner with what he's doing? Because, as I firmly believe kids are difference makers right now. And you guys as parents or grandparents or whatever investment that you have in the life of a kid matter in that. And you're investing in some really big things by investing in the lives of the kids that are in your life. So what's our next step?
Next step, talk. If two-parent home, have a conversation. What are the boundaries that you have that you didn't know you have? And are there any boundaries you need to set? And if your kids are old enough, have a conversation with them. Are the boundaries clear? Clarity wins a lot. Are the boundaries clear? Yeah. And just let it be a conversation that forms them. And then in some ongoing ways, we'll talk about some other topics, days going forward, things like dreams, how we dream for our kids, and those actually help shape our boundaries. Yeah. And then if you're looking for a quick resource, anything by Dr. Henry Cloud, he's got all sorts of books on boundaries at different stages of life and different stages of parenting. Dr. Henry Cloud, he's a great resource. Probably saved my brain when our girls were in early high school, his book on boundaries with teens. So engage in some of that as well. And then we'll have another conversation in the days ahead.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.